So Aljo and Jan are finally going to fight, and I want to ask you who's going to win. And we would have a better indication of this, wouldn't we? Because it's all open for interpretation. Like the first time that they went out there and fight, that's when we're left guessing. We're left to guess who's faster and who's more strategic, and the wrestling of Jan, the striking of Petr. I mean, it's one of these things that we don't really have to guess that anymore. I mean, I thought that fight told us pretty much all that we needed to know. We know for sure Sterling has the skills to go and whip Petr Yan, right? Well, you might not agree with me. You might say, Chael, that's exactly not what I saw. Well, I think you did. I think that's exactly what you saw in the first round of that fight. Now, as that fight went on a little bit later, the tide started to turn. And we've seen more of that from Jan since. We've seen Jan's ability to weather a storm. If you go and watch the first round of Jan versus Sandhagen, I thought it was the more telling rounds in Jan's entire career because of the adjustments that he had to make. To make an adjustment live, it's very difficult. You'll hear announcers talk about it, or you'll even hear fighters doing interviews trying to rework history as a way of serving themselves. It's like every business book written by every millionaire ever. They rework history when they write their book. Well, I knew, and I was just sure if I did this, and I had a self-belief while everybody told me no. None of that's true, but it's the way they want the story to be told. Fighters will do that same thing. I'm sharing with you to see somebody make adjustments and actually do it live in front of the world while across from another trained killer who's trying to do damage to them. Very hard. And it's what Jan did after the first round against Sandhagen, but it's also what Jan was doing against Aljo. I would surmise that if you've watched that fight recently, your lying eyes told you that Sterling was getting tired. Now, fatigue is always a part of this, and I would not dismiss that. But it was not just fatigue that was starting to look better for Jan. Jan was making some adjustments. Number one was with the distance. He just wasn't letting Aljo get all the way in. He was letting him get part way in. And that's where Jan's strong. He knows his own body mechanics. He knows his own power. He knows how to go to the body. He knows how to use those uppercuts. He knows when to use an elbow. He can't do that when Sterling's all the way in, like, say, Sterling was in round one. Now, the reason I bring this to you is I do think also that conditioning played a role in that. I think that fight ended up being a little bit harder for Sterling than Sterling thought it was going to be. And when a fighter gets on a roll, it can be a huge deficit. I would argue for you guys till I'm blue in the face that you did not have a fair depiction of skills when you saw Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm. I take nothing away from Holly, and the right girl won. What I'm sharing with you is Ronda was on a roll, and that's very dangerous. If you get used to the hardest thing in life, which is a cage fight in front of the world wearing almost nothing, and your only armor is a gum shield and 4 ounces across your hands. If you get used to that being easy, if you get used to that being quick, if you get used to thinking before you go out there, this isn't going to be very hard. Look, nothing will throw you off from a mental standpoint faster than being in a fight that turns out to be harder than you thought it was going to be. So when we see fighters get on rolls, it's devastating. You go get 5, 4, 6 in a row, that's a crazy number, and you're out of there in less than 5 minutes. It's a crazy number. Chimaev is going to be tested with this. Many people are already saying, well, how's he going to do in the deep waters? And then his teammates try to answer that question, go, well, in practice, he can go 5 hard rounds. It's different when you actually have to go and do it. It's very different when you can't breathe through your nose and you still got 3 rounds left. It's very different when you're used to seeing a target and all of a sudden one eye is swollen shut and you can't breathe through your nose and there's 14 minutes left. Now, we see nothing from Chimaev to say that he's going to fail. I'm just offering for you that test has to be done. And when you go and look at what Jan, I apologize, Sterling had just been through. Sterling had just been out there with Corey Sandhagen. Sandhagen was the favorite going to that fight. Sandhagen had made everybody look. Sandhagen is fantastic. But Sterling got him down really quick, and he was dry, and it was a perfect storm. Sterling found his back, and 43 seconds later, they're done. When that happens to when what in life you would lay in bed and envision to be one of your most difficult moments, and it's 5 days away. And then 3 days away, you're later envisioning one of your most trying moments. And all of a sudden, it's 1 day away. One of the hardest things I'm ever going to be asked to do on my time on this earth. And then you're done 43 seconds later and you never took a scratch. It can have a real adverse effect on you mentally, and you don't want it to. You want that same anxiety 5 days before. You want that same caution and worry 30 days before. You want certain apprehensiveness that makes you want to go to the sink and vomit 1 day before. You need that. But you can lose it due to your own success at times. So I do submit for you that while Sterling, possibly even to himself, believes, I trained as hard as I should have, I was prepared as I should have been, I was as focused and I was determined. If all of those things are true, still coming off an experience of what should have been one of the hardest things that you're ever going to be asked to do on your time on this earth, ended up not, it puts you in a weird spot. I have never seen Aljamain Sterling give in due to fatigue. I have seen him fatigue. Every single fighter, when he gets done competing, had better be fatigued or he held out. If you ever look across and go, that fighter looks tired, that fighter had better be tired. But I have never seen it work against Aljo. And I was starting to see where it was taking its toll. Where that night was harder and much harder, if we're just to be fair and logical, and you juxtapose it against his previous time in there that happened to be sandhagging and happened to be 40-some seconds long. I think that the layoff is helpful to Aljo. I think some of the beautiful performances that Jan had, I could even just go to Jan Sandhagen. I always knew Jan was a badass. That really wasn't up for debate. He had this beautiful record. He'd been there with Jose Aldo, and he found a way against Uriah Favorite. That was pretty well beyond debate, but you still have questions until you see a guy deal with it. Well, can he come back? What happens if he's down a round? What happens if he's hurt? What happens? And you start asking all of these questions when you get these really great fighters. I'm not ready to say that Aljo was wilting due to the fatigue. I think that the fight was harder than he thought it was going to be, and I also think for Aljo to go out and see what I saw in Petr Yan, which was his fight against Sandhagen, which showed how goddamn good he is, I think that's helpful. I think 5 days prior to that fight, Sterling did not lay in bed panicked. 3 days before that fight, he did not lay in bed with the realization of one of the hardest things I'm ever going to be asked to do is upon me. One night before the fight, I don't think he needed to go to the sink because he pretends had to vomit because he had so much anxiety, but I don't think he had that. I think he's got it now. Not to mention, if you did see a lack in conditioning, if that's what you saw and you saw it correctly, there's been plenty of time to solve that problem. I've had some fights with some guys, and man, they got some skills. There are some real deficits. Do I have enough time? Can I learn how to slip out of a jab and land a liver shot to the body? I've only got 10 weeks. Can I do it? I've been trying to do that for 17 years and haven't got it done. What's going to be different in 10 weeks? I mean, that's a real thing that you have to face. If the only thing that you have to face is to make sure that your conditioning can hold up for the duration of the fight, which is scheduled for 5 rounds, I think Aljo's in a good spot. I would just bring that to you because if you rewatch that fight, right, that whole thing's gotten silly. These guys are having fun with it. Jan started off saying about Aljo, he never should have stayed down and he's a cowardly champion. That pissed Sterling off. Sterling had no choice. The referee is the one who stopped the fight. The referee is the one who raised his hand. Bruce Buffer is the one that declared him champion. Dana White is the one that put the belt around him. Sterling had no choice in that matter. So now what's Sterling do? Go, yeah, you're right. I feel the same way that you do. Hey, Bruce, don't say my name. Hey, Dana, don't lock those around my waist. The whole thing got really weird. So Sterling's way of dealing was to shove it up everybody's ass. Say, you cheated and you hurt me. And look who's the champ. He did everything right. I don't know that the game needs to end. I wouldn't mind if Sterling shows up to the press conference wearing a helmet. I wouldn't mind if Sterling walks to the ring in a neck brace. I mean, how silly do you want to get with it? Either way, guys, that is nothing more than marketing. Make no mistake, these two are staring at each other every single day in their mind's eye. They are going to practice every single day, planning for each other, and they know full well what they're getting into. If it was a conditioning issue, you can bet your ass Sterling's had enough time. I'm not conceding that it was. I will tell you from an X's and O's of physicality standpoint, the distance and the distance control after the second round was lost by Sterling, and it was won by Yan. But for Sterling to want to play any kind of a head game is fair game. Sterling, if I was in Sterling's spot, I'd tell him again, we're watching, I got a new cornerman. This cornerman used to work for the commission. He's got a rule book in his hand. All we're going to do is watch it. I would make Petr Yan, before he threw absolutely any punch, second guess himself and go, is this legal? Okay, I can knee the guy here. Can I kick him? Okay, am I allowed to elbow him here? I would make him second guess. I would play the game. Maybe it worked, maybe it wouldn't. Any advantage is fair advantage. And my arching premise is, I don't know who's going to win. I'm asking you guys who's going to win. Maybe you're going to part with your money. That's between those boys, and we're all going to find out. But if anybody thinks they came to the conclusion that that fight was getting pulled away and going in Yan's favor, even if you're right, now I saw something different, but even if you're right, that would be a conditioning issue, which between then and now is more than enough time for Aljo to correct.